when veteran basketball color analyst Greg Starrick is asked to examine one of the most storied careers among local athletes over the past century, his own, he gets stuck somewhere near the beginning. A lifelong Marion resident who left Southern Illinois only briefly to play for a basketball legend, Greg Starrick loves to recall his sophomore year in high school, back before he had set the basketball world on fire and set school and conference records that still stand more than 50 years later. 2 years before, he was one of the nation's top recruits, with 250 offers and the choice between playing on the hallowed courts of Kansas University and the University of Kentucky. Starrick was the youngest starter on one of the best basketball teams in Marion High School's history. In 1965, MHS students occupied a new campus on the south end of town, but still used the old gymnasium at what is now Marion Junior High School on West Main Street. Most people wouldn't believe me if I described the atmosphere of those games, Starrick will recall. Standing room only crowds, standing 4 deep around the top of that old gym, it was incredible. Starrick was a starting guard for the Marion team that included Ray Fossey, another of the top athletes in Southern Illinois history, 2 years older than Starrick with a future that would bring fame as a Major League Baseball All-Star. Starrick says being accepted as a sophomore playing on the varsity basketball team was very important to him, and that team brought lasting friendships that are still very strong today. Playing in the state tournament as a sophomore and playing on arguably one of the best high school basketball teams in the history of Marion basketball obviously stands out, he says. Under the leadership of Coach Dick Jones and with fellow starters Fossey, Gene Watson, Dick Baggett, and Bobby Shad Owens, along with several key role players coming off the bench, Starrick got his first taste of statewide attention that year. Back in the days when all Illinois teams competed for a single state title, the Wildcats advanced to the Elite Eight, losing their quarterfinal game in Champaign. Starrick says he was a small piece of the puzzle on a very good team. He scored the ball even as a sophomore, but he says he was fortunate to be a starter. The upperclassmen on that team were fortunate to have Starrick join the mix. The young sharpshooter averaged 16.5 points a game his sophomore year. After making the all-tournament team at the Centralia Holiday Tournament in December, sports writers around the state began taking notice, and by the end of the season, he had received special mention for all-state honors by the Chicago Daily News, the Chicago American, and the Champaign News-Gazette. He made the Evansville Courier's all-area team and was all-conference in the South 7, then considered by many as the top basketball conference in Illinois. Just a year earlier, there had been some question as to whether Greg would even be a Wildcat. His father, Hall of Fame coach Wendell Starrick, a successful coach for both Johnson City and Marion, had been let go by the Marion School Board after a loss in the 1964 Super Sectional. Greg laughs when he recalls that time, which he calls his first taste of the recruiting process. Local coaches vied for his family to move to their communities before Greg started high school. But he decided to stay in Marion and prove something. The marks he made over the next few years would complete his father's legacy at Marion. My dad taught me the game of basketball, Greg says, and the number of hours that my dad and I spent together were too many to count, working on my mechanics and the way I shot the basketball. Most of all, he taught me discipline and respect for the game. A lot of people take a lot of those things for granted today, he said. Greg's junior and senior years brought less team success, but unbelievable statistics and accolades for him. As a junior, Starrick averaged 30.3 points and was chosen one of the top 5 players in the state of Illinois. Before his senior year, his status had been elevated to All-American First 5. That status held up through the season, and Parade Magazine, among others, named him First-Team High School All-American. He was recognized by media throughout the country, including a mention in Sports Illustrated, and both the Illinois House of Representatives and Illinois Senate commended him. His name was written into the history books that year with an unbelievable average of 33.5 points per game, including 511 points in conference games alone. In the days before the three-point line, most of Starrick's points came from 20 to 25 feet. Translating his numbers to today's game, his scoring average would be well above 40 points per game. Late that season, the old gym on West Main Street was rocking as Marion took on West Frankfort in front of another packed house. Many fans, even some who weren't there, recall seeing Starrick pour in 70 of his team's 86 points in a close loss to the Redbirds. But someone in the stands received almost as much attention as Greg. UC legendary University of Kentucky coach Adolph Rupp was visiting Marion that night. He obviously saw everything he needed to see, and later that night visited with Greg and his family and asked Greg to come to Kentucky. Rupp, who still ranks high in NCAA career wins, offered Starrick a scholarship, but the decision wasn't easy for the senior, who was being recruited by 250 schools. He narrowed his choices to UK, Kansas, and Southern Illinois University. Greg says SIU belonged up there on that list. It made sense, especially in those days, he said. In addition to being just down the road, SIU was 1 year removed from winning the National Invitational Tournament at Madison Square Garden. The NIT was considered the true national title for many decades and still held the nation's attention in the 1960s. But Rupp and his Wildcats had been in the NCAA title game a year earlier, and the pull to UK was strong. Starrick was offered the chance to play both basketball and baseball at Kentucky. As a shortstop who recruiters and scouts had first noticed when he played on the same diamond as Ray Fosse, Starrick could have left the hardwood behind and pursued a baseball career if he chose. Playing two sports in the Southeastern Conference was an opportunity Starrick couldn't pass up, though he would be moving a good distance from his family and his girlfriend, Marion High School cheerleader Sherry Phelps, who was a year behind him in school. Before 1972, NCAA rules prohibited freshmen from playing basketball. So when he moved to Lexington after graduating in 1967, Starrick knew he had a year on the freshman team to be followed by his first college baseball season. As winter 1968 turned to spring, he was named MVP of the freshman basketball team and played well enough for the UK baseball team to be drafted by the Cincinnati Reds. As his sophomore year at UK began, Starrick had high hopes but was also feeling a little homesick. Contributing to the problem was the fact that his mother was having some health issues. His UK career had a promising start, coming off the bench and scoring 37 points in 7 games that fall, but Starrick missed Southern Illinois. In retrospect, he says, "I was probably getting the playing time I deserved at the time. Assistant coach and later UK head coach Joby Hall was good to me, and I still count him as a friend, and I have nothing but respect for Coach Rupp. There were no hard feelings, but I thought SIU would be a good opportunity." So midway through his sophomore season, Starrick transferred to SIU, where he looked forward to playing for Coach Jack Hartman. Under transfer rules, he sat out a full year and became eligible for the spring semester of 1970. Those would turn out to be the final months of Hartman's tenure at SIU, as Hartman took the head coaching position at Kansas State. Starrick averaged 16.4 points per game in the 16 games he was eligible to play as a sophomore in Carbondale. Then, under a new head coach Paul Lambert, Greg scored 22.4 points per game his junior season and was named All-Conference along with Benton's Doug Collins, who played for Illinois State and would go on to an NBA playing and coaching career. Starrick became the first player to score in double figures in every game throughout a season at SIU. He also set a school record by hitting 31 free throws in a row. Following his junior year, Starrick was again drafted by a professional league, this time by the ABA's Miami franchise. He says he gave serious consideration to Miami, but especially in those days, a college education was a very valuable thing to have. Returning as a senior to SIU, he saw his scoring average rise to 23.8 points per game as he became just the second SIU player ever to score more than 600 points in a single season. After just 2.5 seasons as a Saluki, Starrick sat third on the all-time career scoring list with 1,428 points. He also set records on the national level. The mark he set as the top free throw shooter in the nation, shooting 92.5%, was also the NCAA record, one that he would hold for the next 35 years. He had made a string of 30 consecutive free throws that year. Playing close to home with high school sweetheart Sherry now on the sidelines with the Saluki cheerleading squad, Greg set records that would stand for decades. In 2013, Starrick was named to the 25-member All-Century team at Southern Illinois. Starrick didn't look back after transferring to SIU and says he has no regrets. After his senior year, Starrick briefly pursued a career in the NBA, making it to the final cut with 2 teams. There were fewer teams and fewer jobs in the NBA back then, and he says he was able to leave basketball behind him and pursue other things. After marrying Sherry, a union that's still going strong after nearly 5 decades, Starrick landed back in Marion, where he worked briefly for Leon Webb, who had brought the first Toyota franchise to town. But the president of John A. Logan College in Carterville recognized Starrick's local popularity and public speaking skills and asked him to become the school's director of college relations. They kept him busy. He ended up becoming Logan's head baseball coach and an assistant basketball coach and executive director of the school's foundation. One of his volunteer baseball teams was the first from the college to be ranked nationally in the mid-1970s. In the late 1970s, Starrick was asked to join Mike Reese, a young sports director on WCIL radio, on the Saluki men's basketball broadcast team. He has worked alongside Reese for more than 4 decades, and their broadcast of SIU games are among the most popular on regional airwaves. TV networks have also recognized Starrick's skills as a sports commentator. He has worked with Cardinals broadcaster John Rooney and accomplished a personal goal by working a game for ESPN. The owner of 2 businesses, JB Sales and U-Save Office Furniture, as well as a real estate developer, Starrick had plenty on his plate when John A. Logan College came calling again in 2016. He returned to the school as director of athletics. He and Sherry are the parents of a son, Ryan, who is an officer with the Illinois State Police. Ryan is married and has a son named Cade. Starrick's number 23 hangs in Wilson Gymnasium at Marion High School, where it was retired years ago. In the final home game of the 2020 season, a regional title win for the Wildcats, senior Jackson Connor broke Starrick's career scoring record.
Basket blocked by Braid, tipped around, comes to Connor, and he's done it! Marion's all-time leading scorer is now Jackson Connor. He just broke Greg Starrick's all-time record.
Greg congratulated Connor and was thrilled when the young athlete decided to begin his college career at John A. Logan College. 50 years after an amazing high school career ended, the memories of his accomplishments and the electric atmosphere at his high school games have started to fade for some Wildcat fans, and that's fine with Starrick, who never played for the recognition. When I played, I just enjoyed playing, he says. Sports were fun for me. My dad taught me to enjoy the games, and that's what I would ask my grandson today. Are you having fun? Then play. As always, we owe a debt of gratitude to Sam Latuka and the Marion, Illinois Historic Preservation website for this Turning Back Time, and to the Arcadia Wealth Group for their sponsorship. Reporting for the Marion Star Live, I'm Bill Swinford.